Otis Renfrew had run Renfrew Auto Repair off Route 9 for 19 years, a small two-bay garage with a hand-painted sign that had faded to the point where most people found the place by word of mouth rather than by reading it, and he had, in those 19 years, developed a rule he almost never broke. If someone came in stranded, scared, and alone after dark, he fixed what he could fix and worried about the invoice later. It was a Wednesday night in October, just past 9, when the woman's car rolled into his lot on what was very obviously its last few rotations, smoke curling faintly from under the hood, the engine making a sound that told Otis before he even lifted the hood that this wasn't a simple fix. The woman who got out was maybe 50, dressed plainly, visibly shaken. The specific shaken of someone who had been driving alone on a dark stretch of highway and had just watched their only way home start failing beneath them. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said. "I saw your lights on. I didn't know where else to go." "You're not bothering anybody," Otis said. "Let's take a look." Her name was Delia Ashcombe, and she explained while Otis worked that she'd been driving back from visiting her sister 2 counties over, that she didn't have anyone she could call this late, that her phone was nearly dead, and that she was, if she was honest, more frightened sitting on the shoulder of Route 9 in the dark than she'd been in a long time. Otis worked on the car for the better part of 2 hours. What had started as a minor coolant issue had cascaded, as these things sometimes do, into a cracked hose that had overheated the engine badly enough to warp a gasket. The kind of repair that would normally run several $100s in parts and labor, even at Otis's modest, small-town rates. When he finally lowered the hood and wiped his hands on a rag, Delia asked, reaching for her purse, "What do I owe you?" "Nothing," Otis said. Delia blinked at him. "That can't be right. You were here 2 hours. You replaced parts." "You were stranded, alone, at night, on a road with no lighting," Otis said, like this was simply the end of the discussion rather than the start of one. "I wasn't going to leave you sitting out there so I could charge you for it later. Get home safe. That's the payment." Delia tried for several minutes to insist, offering cash, offering to mail a check, offering to come back and pay properly once she'd had time to go to the bank, and Otis turned down every version of it with the same calm insistence. The manner of a man who had made this particular decision a long time ago and saw no reason to revisit it now. "You can do something for someone else sometime," he said finally. "That's the whole deal. Now go on. It's late." Delia left with her car running smoothly, and Otis assumed, as he had assumed after every similar night over 19 years, that this was the end of it. A stranger helped. A good deed logged privately in the back of his own mind, nothing more expected in return. He did not expect what happened the following afternoon. A car pulled into the lot just after 2, and out of it stepped Delia Ashcombe, dressed differently than the night before, sharper, more composed, accompanied by a second woman carrying a leather folio, whom Delia introduced simply as "my lawyer." Otis felt his stomach drop in the particular way it does when a good deed suddenly seems like it might be about to become a liability. Some vague fear about parts he'd used, about liability waivers he'd never made her sign, about whatever it was people brought lawyers to garages for. "Miss Ashcombe," he said carefully. "Is there a problem with the car?" "No," Delia said. "The car's perfect. That's actually the problem." Otis didn't understand, and his face must have shown it, because Delia smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "I should have told you last night who I was," she said. "I didn't, because I didn't want it to change how you treated me, and I wanted to see how you'd treat a stranded woman who was just a stranded woman. I'm the general counsel for Ashcombe Merrick Freight. We run a fleet of just over 400 vehicles across 6 states. Otis still didn't fully follow where this was going, and Delia, seeing that, got to the point. "We spend an enormous amount of money every year on fleet maintenance contracts with large regional shops, most of whom, frankly, treat drivers like line items. Last night, a mechanic I'd never met spent 2 hours fixing my car, at his own cost, past 9 at night. Because I was a woman alone and scared, and refused to take $1 for it. I've been thinking about it since I woke up this morning, and I decided I wanted to know exactly what kind of business this was before I made an offer. She nodded to the lawyer beside her, who opened the leather folio. We'd like to bring Renfrew Auto Repair on as a regional maintenance partner for our East Coast fleet, Delia said. Not because you're the cheapest option, and not because you're the biggest. You're neither. Because I want the drivers on my payroll, the ones out on the road alone at night the way I was last night, serviced by someone who treats a stranded person like a human being before he treats them like an invoice. Otis stood there for a long moment, rag still in his hand, trying to reconcile the modest two-bay operation he'd built out of a converted service station in 2007 with the words regional maintenance partner and East Coast fleet. That's a lot more work than I've got capacity for, he said honestly. It's just me and one other mechanic here. We know, the lawyer said, speaking for the first time. The contract includes capital for expansion, additional bays, additional hires, equipment financing, structured so you retain full ownership. We're not buying your shop, Mr. Renfrew. We're investing in it. Because Miss Ashcombe believes, and having reviewed your service history, I tend to agree, that a shop run on the principle you demonstrated last night is worth more to us long-term than a cheaper contract with someone who wouldn't have stopped to help her at all. Otis asked for a day to think it over, which both women said they expected and respected, and he spent that evening doing what he always did when a decision mattered. He called his wife Marguerite, who had kept the books for Renfrew Auto since the beginning and laid out every detail of the offer while she listened without interrupting. 19 years, Marguerite said, when he finished, and the thing that finally grows this place is the one night you didn't try to make money off somebody. Otis signed the contract 8 days later, after his own lawyer. A cousin who'd done real estate closings for years and had never handled anything quite like this, reviewed every clause and found the terms, to his visible surprise, entirely fair. The expansion took 4 months. Renfrew Auto Repair went from 2 bays to 6, from 2 mechanics to 11, and took on its first fleet contract just after the new year. Servicing Ashcombe-Merrick vehicles across a 3-state radius while still keeping the same walk-in policy Otis had run the place on for 19 years, including, posted now on a small laminated card by the register at Marguerite's insistence, the same rule that had started all of it: anyone stranded after dark gets helped first and billed never. Delia Ashcombe still brings her own car to Otis for its regular service, waving off the offer of a courtesy loaner every time, and she tells people, when asked how a freight company's general counsel ended up co-signing a small-town garage's expansion, that it was the easiest business decision she ever made, because she'd spent 30 years around contracts and handshake deals. And only once in all that time had she met someone who treated a total stranger better than he had to, with absolutely nothing to gain from it. Right up until, as it turned out, everything changed because of it.